For all its beauty and splendor, the ocean can be a cruel teacher. Huge storms at sea are a requisite of fear and uncertainty. In most cases, it will sap morale, lead to poor decision-making, and leave everyone in panic mode. For the Greeks of old, the sea, with all its uncontrollable force, was a divine power, something that could turn the tide for all who sailed on it, for better or worse, at the whim of the god Poseidon, who ruled the waves from the shadowy depths. Unbridled energy like the seas has always prompted fear and fascination. Click the subscribe and like buttons. This is Outdoor Disasters. The Gulf of Guinea is a vast and diverse region stretching from Senegal to Angola, covering approximately 3,000 miles of coastline. It is an important shipping zone transporting oil and gas, as well as goods to and from Central and Southern Africa. On any given day, there are around 1,500 fishing vessels, tankers, and cargo ships navigating its waters. Storms, piracy, armed robbery at sea, kidnapping of seafarers, illegal fishing, smuggling and trafficking, and transnational organized crime pose a major threat to maritime security in the Gulf of Guinea and ultimately to the economic development of the entire region. It is the primary access route to and from Africa's first and second largest oil producers, Nigeria and Angola. Accounting for 2/3 of Africa's oil production, the region holds 4.5% of the world's proven oil reserves and 2.7% of proven natural gas reserves. For Harrison Okene, the Gulf of Guinea would be a tomb of dread. On May 26, 2013, stormy weather caused rough waters off the coast of Nigeria. The tugboat Jaskin 4 rocked on the dark water as it carried out an important mission. The 12-man crew was there to secure a 700-foot oil tanker full of gasoline that had just been collected from the Chevron platform. As part of the $3 billion industry that extracts 238,000 gallons of oil from the ocean yearly, the massive tanker was being thrown around on the rough waters. The Jaskin 4 was called to fix a line to the tanker to keep it from capsizing and releasing thousands of gallons of oil into the ocean. Although the oil tanker was massive compared to the Jaskin 4, it couldn't withstand the force of Mother Nature. The crew on the tugboat didn't seem too concerned about the dangerous waters because they were used to going on these types of missions in similar conditions. It didn't occur to them that they were also in danger. Among the crew was 29-year-old Harrison Okene. He was the cook on the Jaskin 4 and had been on missions like this several times. He knew the risks of being in dangerous waters next to massive oil tankers like the one the crew was helping that day. Okene knew that as long as he cooked good food and didn't make the captain sick, his job was secure. On the morning of May 26, 2013, he awoke at 5 a.m. to start prepping food like every other day on the boat. He sleepily got out of bed and headed to the bathroom. He felt the way most people feel when they have to wake up at 5 a.m. on a Sunday. Shortly after Okene sat down to do his morning business, a huge wave smacked into the side of the Jaskin 4. It sprayed the deck with water and cracked pieces of the hull. The massive wave hit the Jaskin 4 with so much force that it flipped the tugboat on its side. Okene was still in the bathroom and he was thrown out of the stall as the boat started sinking. He rushed out of the bathroom and ran down the hall to the emergency hatch. 3 of his crewmates were already trying to seal off that hatch, but a huge wave of freezing water hit them. They were carried into the abyss, and Okene knew the men were dead. Trapped below deck, he had no time to think, with his only escape route blocked by rushing water. He had nowhere to go. Okene fought against the current to get to the officer's cabin. However, the water was too strong. It pushed him back into the bathroom attached to the captain's room and against a wall as the waves rolled the boat upside down. The Jaskin 4 started sinking to the bottom of the ocean, but something strange happened along the way. Okene didn't drown. As water filled the room, he swam up and got caught in a 4-foot air bubble. It was completely dark, so Harrison Okene hung on as the tugboat sank further. It seemed like the boat had been sinking for hours when it finally settled on the ocean floor. Harrison was sweating even in the freezing water because he was terrified. He was trapped in what he thought would be his watery grave. Harrison couldn't move from his air bubble. He had to tread water or use his strength to hold his head above the water. He maintained his breathing because he knew his oxygen was limited. He had no food, light, or water and was practically nude in freezing water. Initially, he thought there was no way anyone would find him because everyone else on board was dead. But Harrison Okene refused to give up, knowing the freezing water or excessive carbon monoxide would eventually take him. He didn't know what to do, so he just prayed. Okene said, "All around me was just black and noisy. I was crying and calling on Jesus to rescue me. I prayed so hard. I was so hungry and thirsty and cold, and I was just praying to see some kind of light." When the Jaskin 4 flipped, Nigerian rescue crews got the Mayday call. But they couldn't do anything because the storm was too strong. There wouldn't have been time to perform a rescue operation before the boat started sinking. It left Okene in a tough spot. While he waited underwater, hoping someone would find him, rescue crews knew there wasn't much they could do when it sunk. Even when the weather cleared, there were still hazards, with someone swimming inside the upside-down ship at the bottom of the ocean. Harrison had no idea how far down the boat had sunk, and didn't know rescuers even knew something had happened. Unfortunately, the Jaskin 4 was sitting 100 feet below the surface. Professional scuba divers are not allowed to dive deeper than 100 feet for more than 20 minutes. If rescuers tried to go inside the sunken tugboat, it would take longer than 20 minutes to retrieve bodies and inspect the ship. Meanwhile, Mr. Okene was starving, freezing, and pruning like a raisin. He had to hold onto a sink to keep his head above water. Harrison was struggling to stay above the water because he was growing tired. He knew he needed to get out of the water and rest because the salt was peeling his skin. He decided to make a risky move, using his last bit of strength to swim into the officer's cabin. He swam into the darkness, avoiding dangerous obstacles, and collected whatever wooden objects he could find. Mr. Okene made a few trips to gather enough wood to fashion a small raft. It wasn't anything great, but it floated and got him out of the water. The small raft allowed Okene to dry off, warm up, and rest his aching muscles. He was left alone with his thoughts, reviewing his life until that point. The only sounds he heard were his breath and the water hitting the sides of the cabin. It was so quiet that Harrison could hear his dead crew members being eaten by fish and other unseen sea life. Harrison thought about how much time he had left and wondered if anyone would find him. He thought about his family and friends. Okene lay on his makeshift raft for nearly 3 days. All he could do was pray and wait for a slow death when the oxygen ran out. He lost track of time lying there, and hours felt like days. He didn't know if anyone would find him or if anyone was even looking. He didn't know when his time would come, and he would be laid to rest with his crew. Luckily, that moment didn't come. After almost 3 days, a South African dive team was able to get down to the wreckage. They salvaged what they could, swimming through the depths in full gear with flashlights. The divers found the bodies of 10 dead crew members who didn't make it out of the wreckage. The divers then headed into the ship to investigate. They swam through the dark wreckage of the Jaskin 4. As the divers were looking around, Harrison heard a noise he hadn't heard before. Okene was so shocked when he heard a metallic tapping on the ship. He knew he was running out of oxygen, so he got off his raft and tore the faucet from the sink. He pulled himself up and started banging the faucet against the ceiling. He wanted to make as much noise as possible so the divers would know someone was alive. Harrison Okene worried if they didn't hear him, the divers would leave him to die. He also worried that the divers would mess up whatever was keeping the air bubble intact. Okene made as much noise as possible. Moments later, he saw a flashlight down the hallway. It was the first light he had seen in nearly 3 days. He didn't want to scare the diver and cause a problem, so Okene gently tapped him as he swam by. Harrison worried the diver would try to stab him, thinking he was being attacked by a creature from the deep. Although the diver was startled, they were happy to see someone alive. Harrison Okene had become an accidental aquanaut. His rescue was captured on a dive camera, showing him reaching out to the diver and standing in the small air bubble. He was only in his underwear and more than ready to end this horrifying ordeal. On May 28th, 62 hours after the Jaskin 4 capsized and sank, Harrison Okene was on his way to the surface. He was starving, dangerously dehydrated, and exhausted. The divers equipped him with a rebreather and oxygen tank, guiding him out of the wreckage and toward the surface. He used his last ounce of strength to swim with them, but he couldn't get out of the water just yet. Harrison had been underwater for so long and inhaled so much nitrogen that bringing him straight to the surface would have killed him immediately. Before Okene could resurface, he had to enter a decompression chamber. Harrison was guided to a diving bell designed to maintain internal pressure to transfer him to the decompression chamber. He lost consciousness during the transfer but survived. He suffered from peeling skin due to prolonged saltwater exposure. The decompression chamber adjusts the body to normal air pressure after spending time in the deep ocean. After 3 days at the bottom of the ocean, Harrison Okene had to spend 60 hours in the chamber. Even though the decompression chamber was small, it was an improvement from his air bubble. Okene also dealt with recurring nightmares and insatiable hunger, but otherwise he was in good health. He thought at least a few of his crewmates got off the boat before it sank, but soon learned he was the sole survivor. On June 1, 2013, Okene was finally released from the hospital. He was able to go home and see his family after thinking he would never hug them again. The terrifying underwater ordeal is believed to be the longest any human has ever survived, trapped underwater. People trapped in closed rooms face serious problems because the concentration of carbon dioxide rises when they start breathing. The level rises until it becomes toxic, and a person can suffocate within a few hours. However, Okene survived for 3 days. Although he was happy to see his mother and wife again, Harrison had to deal with PTSD and anxiety for a while. He would wake up in the middle of the night feeling like his bed was sinking. Harrison had worked on boats for years before the Jaskin 4 sank. However, the ordeal made him say he would never go into the ocean again. He suffered for a few years before he decided to overcome his fear of the ocean. After almost 2 years of staying out of the water, Mr. Okene became a certified commercial diver in 2015. The rescue diver who discovered him in the wrecked ship presented Okene with his diving certificate. It was a heartwarming moment and a new chapter of his journey. Since getting back in the water, Okene has found a newfound love for the ocean and diving. He is now an IMCA Class II commercial air diver and can dive to depths of 160 feet. Harrison said, "I am enjoying diving. It's life for me. It's fun." Although he was once scared of the ocean, Harrison Okene enjoys being in the water now. No one could have imagined that he would get back in the water and feel comfortable after what he went through. He worked hard to overcome his fears. Although it's always advisable to avoid storms as much as possible. They are part of life at sea, and sometimes you can't avoid them. But when a storm comes your way, you should understand how to set up for the storm and how to deal with the worst. Sailing through a storm will test your strength, endurance, seamanship, and boating skills to the bitter limits. It can wreak serious havoc on your boat, and any sailor, whether a beginner or experienced, should know what to do in a storm when sailing. You should have your boat properly rigged to easily access anything in short order. Whether you can see a storm coming from far away or see it within seconds and on top of your head, the boat should be well prepared to deal with any condition. It's fundamental to ensure that your lifelines are secure, the lines are strong and unworn, and all the emergency gear is on board and up to date. You should also update yourself on the weather on the days you're planning to go out, though it may be inaccurate. Make sure that you maintain high spirits and that everybody works in tandem and is on the same wavelength. This will only work if you calmly work out a plan and communicate the plan to everyone. Crucial information so you can avoid an outdoor disaster.